Welcome to another edition of Capital City Matters. I'm your host, Elizabeth Hoffman. Financial troubles are being felt all over the country, and unfortunately, the Missouri Department of Transportation is not exempt from those troubles. We have with us our guest today, the Chief Engineer of the Missouri Department of Transportation, Dave Nichols. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today.
Elizabeth, thank you for having me.
Great, glad you're here. It's been almost a year since the Missouri Department of Transportation has announced plans to reduce their staff by about 1,200 employees.
Yes.
How is that reduction going as of now?
Well, anytime you go through a 19% staff reduction, it's difficult to do. I would be remiss if I didn't say it was a very big challenge. But the process itself is working its way through. We are over 1,000 less employees today as we speak. So we're making progress there. The hardest parts are coming because we now have to align our employees into the right jobs, and our attrition is not taking place in the right areas. So at the end of the day, this fall we're probably going to end up with some layoffs.
And how is that affecting the employee morale?
Well, it actually has had its negative implications, as you can imagine, but once people find out that they're landing in a position through the competitive process, and I'll mention that every person in MoDot, all the way up through my job as chief engineer, we all had to compete for our jobs and reapply. So it's been a stressful environment, I have to say that. But once the employees land in their jobs, they're very excited to move on and get back to work and really take the department to a new direction.
And the plans were also to sell over 700 pieces of roadway equipment, along with reduction in staff. Are there actual buyers out there? I mean, in this tough economy, are there buyers out there for this expensive equipment?
Yeah, you'd be amazed. With our Boulder 5-year direction, we are having a 19% reduction in staffing. We're closing 131 facilities across the state. And those facilities are going to be up for sale, and we've already begun that process of selling off those pieces of property. Most of those are maintenance buildings out in the rural parts of the state, but some of them are some pretty valuable pieces of property in Kansas City and St. Louis, so we're going to get some return on our investment there. And then, as you mentioned earlier, the selling of equipment, because of our consolidation of facilities, we're going to be able to sell off equipment that would just be redundant. We don't need that much equipment. And we're going to phase that process in over time so we don't overload the market. But we'll be selling that equipment on gov deals so people can go out and have an opportunity, whether they're other government agencies like cities and counties, that they can go in and bid on this equipment first. And then the private sector, we've already had many contractors asking about when that equipment will be up for sale. And so it's going to be an opportunity to buy some equipment instead of having to go out and buy new stuff.
Right, and all of these reductions and reducing costs throughout the transportation, it's not going to be over just a small period of time. I think they said over 4 years, is that
correct?
right?
Yeah, totally. We have 4 more years to go. It's a 5-year period, but we're going to save $512 million, we estimate, and all of those dollars go onto the road to improve roadway and bridge condition.
And as you mentioned before, there will be offices that'll be either combined or sold, and that's still going on?
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. 1,200 employees, that's a huge percentage of your workforce. What kind of, I guess, will the Missourians, are they going to experience a decrease in their services?
That's a very good question, and we do a lot of surveying of our customers, the citizens of Missouri, about what are the things that MoDOT provides as part of the services that we do that are very important to you. For example, one of the things that we thought was really important to the citizens of Missouri is the quality of mowing the right-of-way, keeping it clean and neat, etc. And you'll find that as we got our feedback from the customers, that isn't nearly as important, obviously, as condition of the roadway and quality of striping and how bright signs are and things like that. So what they're telling us is channel the money that you have into areas that are most important to us as the citizens, and that is keeping the roads and bridges in good condition and make sure we have good visibility while we're driving at night and in the rain.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that as you mentioned, the original amount to be saved was $512 million over a 4-year period, or by the year 2015. Is that number still accurate? Are they trying to stick with that?
Oh yes, we think that's the minimum amount we're going to save. We're hoping we can even save more than that. And then every year after that, we believe that we're going to be able to save at least $117 million in operating costs. And again, those dollars are dollars we can use on services to the customer out on the roadway.
And what are MoDOT's major sources of revenue? Obviously, they get their budget from the state, but what taxes fund that budget?
Well, it's in simple terms, our primary funding source is our 17-cent gas tax at the state level. So when you go buy gas, as high as it is today, and it's interesting that people don't understand that as the price of gas goes up or diesel goes up, the amount of money that MoDOT gets stays the same, and that's 17 cents a gallon. That's fixed, and it's been that way since 1992. We haven't had an increase in funding since then. And that's about $500 million a year in funding that we get from just gas tax and diesel tax at the state level. We get about $250 million a year each in areas, for example, if you go out and buy a new car, the sales tax that you buy or that you pay for that new vehicle, we get about $250 million a year in sales tax on vehicles. And then we get about the same amount, $250 million, on license fees and registration fees. So when you go buy the new driver's license and those things, MoDOT gets about $250 million. And so that's about $1 billion, maybe a little more than that, but that's round numbers. And then we get about $900 million a year in federal revenue. So when you go buy gas, and that's all gas and diesel tax, and that's 18.4 cents a gallon on gasoline and 24.4 cents a gallon on diesel. And those are the dollars that you pay at the pump, but those dollars go to the federal government, and in return we get that money back. And that's about $900 million a year.
Okay. As far as moving forward, what are some other ways that MoDOT is able to save in costs?
Well, the one thing that we're really concerned about is we're getting about as lean as we can, as you mentioned earlier about, you know, how does this impact the customer at the end of the day by downsizing. And we believe we can still provide very good customer service and provide good services and products to the citizens of Missouri with our right sizing that we're going through. But at the end of the day, it's about the revenue that we have to build these big projects around the state. And we're finding that the dollars that are being invested through the gas tax revenue source is really an antiquated process. The dollars that we are getting are not having the same buying power as they did, say, in 1992,
right,
because of inflation and things like that. So we're not being able to keep up with the cost of inflation with a revenue stream that's 20 years old. And it's the same way at the federal level. The last increase in funding at the federal level was 1993. So you can see that the gas tax process it worked for a long time. It's been around for a long time. But I think if you ask the citizens of Missouri, gas is high enough, diesel's high enough, and nobody wants to pay more at the pump.
That's for sure. Are there any projects that are being put on hold right now because of all of these cutbacks?
Well, we're not having to cut any projects because we've done a really good job of planning, working with our planning partners all around the state to make sure that we don't overcommit. We can forecast out for 5 years and find out really what our revenue stream is going to be. But the problem is that we're going from a highway program of $1.2 billion a year when we were really robust with Amendment 3 funding, and now we're down to about $600 million, about half of what we had before. So we're still going to go out and try to do the best we can of keeping our roads and bridges in good condition. The challenge is we can't go out and do those big, great projects that the citizens like to see.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll learn about more things that the Missouri Department of Transportation is experiencing. We'll be right back.
Say Merry Christmas. Did you have a good Christmas? Yeah, get lots of stuff. Yay! Get your horsey. Do something cute. You're just gonna sit there and grin?
If you don't stop your friend from driving drunk, who will? Do whatever it takes.
2 o'clock. Okay.
Your employees who serve in the National Guard and Reserve may seem different. They may work a little harder, be more confident, more willing to make the extra effort to get the job done right. So when your employees need time off to serve, remember, it's not just good for our country, it's good for your business.
Glad you could all make it.
Welcome back to Capital City Matters. We're talking with Dave Nichols, the Chief Engineer of the Missouri Department of Transportation. Dave, there's more and more talk about I-70 and that there's a lot that needs to be done there. Until I looked into this, I didn't realize how much traffic there actually was that went on I-70. I think it said like 31,000 vehicles a day, and that was in the most rural sections.
That's correct.
And then almost 100,000 vehicles a day near Kansas City area. Is most of that traffic on I-70, is that out of state or is that local?
Well, it's interesting that the truck traffic that's on Interstate 70, about 60% of the truck traffic, which makes up 40% of overall all the traffic on I-70, is through traffic. These are truckers that are moving freight across the state of Missouri from the East Coast to the West Coast and the West Coast to the East Coast. So there's a lot of through traffic on I-70, and the truck traffic on I-70 is growing at a faster pace than car traffic on I-70.
Interesting. And I also found that the youngest section of the highway is 46 years old. Was that correct?
That's absolutely correct, yes.
What is the normal life expectancy of a major highway like that?
Well, I-70, when it was designed for a 20-year life. Believe it or not, yes. It was designed for 20 years, and that's a conservative estimate, I have to admit. But it was designed with a thinner pavement section than, you can imagine the trucks back then in the 1950s and early 60s were about 40,000 pounds, and that's how much weight they carried at the time. The trucks today carry 80,000 pounds, and much higher volume of traffic on the interstate, as you know, as a citizen that drives on it. And so, you know, we really believe we've got our money's worth out of I-70, and the condition of it is one of the challenges that we have. But as anybody who drives on it knows, that it's very congested, especially in the more urban sections of it. And it's time that it gets widened, and it needs to have at least another lane on it.
What has been done so far to just keep the maintenance up on the highway?
Well, we do a lot of things. Obviously, it's very important because it is a very vital corridor for the state of Missouri for economic development purposes. Is we have to move our goods and services. People have to get to their jobs. Education, obviously, with the university and Columbia. And so it's very important that we keep I-70 open. The challenge that we have with it is anytime we need to go up and work on I-70, we have to close a lane of traffic, and you can't close it at night any easier than you can close it during the day, and it backs traffic up for miles and miles. So the challenge is that we need to go in and do a reconstruction of I-70, and we've made tremendous investment to get all the planning work done on it. And that's really what led us to the conversation about moving forward with a public-private partnership on I-70.
And if that is the outcome, which is also called a toll road, where would these be set up at?
Well, I have to back up a little bit. You can do a public-private partnership project without using tolling as your funding mechanism, and I think that's where a little bit of the confusion came in when we had our conversation about it with both the public and legislators. And there's many projects around the country that are very big projects like I-70 that are done through the public-private partnership model, where you bring in the private sector to help you with the development of the project through the design, the construction. They can help with the financing mechanisms of it, and it helps bring the cash flow to the state. You just have to imagine I-70, the minimum cost of rebuilding it is $2 billion. The dedicated truck lane portion, which is really the one that has the most, I'll say the grandest ideas, and that's separating cars and trucks, is $4 billion. So having the cash flow in your budget to be able to do that, you really need to bring the private sector in. They can bring in their financing to help do it. But at the end of the day, you still got to pay back those loans. And that's where the tolling concept came in, because we don't have the revenue to pay for it with our traditional funding mechanism, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation. And that's where we thought we'd talk about tolling. And as you've heard, I'm sure, is that the concept of the project on I-70 for reconstruction is very popular. When we talk to legislators and the public, everybody was in consensus that I-70 needs to be rebuilt. Pretty much everybody's in consensus they do not want to do it through tolling, though.
If that were the outcome, though, how long until construction on I-70 could begin using those funds?
Oh, we could move very quickly. All of the environmental clearances, we have all of our federal approvals to move forward. That's the unique thing about I-70 in Missouri, which many states are envious of us. We have all the environmental clearances done, all the permitting's completed, and the Federal Highway Administration has given us the green light. Our issue is at the state level is how are we going to pay for it? And if we had a funding mechanism, we could move forward very quickly, a matter of months, to begin the procurement process.
And what about the cost for keeping up with the attendance and the booths and everything like that?
Well, if it was a tolling project, that would all be done through an electronic toll collection process. But I can tell you that the conversation about tolling has not met with very, very positive outcomes. So tolling is a very modern technology now with electronic collection. There's really no toll booths. You use a transponder in your car or your pickup or your vehicle, and they can charge you based on where you live, how often you drive on the corridor, whether you're moving a long distance or a short distance. There's even sections of it that's been discussed about having free use of the corridor based on short travel between one exit to another exit on I-70, because we're not going to close any of the exits along the corridor. They're all going to be open, and it doesn't make sense to put a toll plaza at every on and off ramp. There's 53 interchanges on I-70, and that just doesn't make good economic sense to be able to, to spend the money to put a toll plaza everywhere. And so there will be sections of the corridor that the public could drive on with no charge. But once you go through a toll plaza, you would be charged based on how you purchased your transponder in your car.
And what is the primary goal as far as what it's going to pay for? Is this just an extra lane on each side, or are they reconstructing all of it?
Well, what we talked about in our concept, that I have to give a lot of credit to Senator Bill Stouffer, who chairs the Senate Transportation Committee, and Mike Kehoe, Senator Mike Kehoe from here in Jeff City, who was our sponsor for the Transportation Committee, who sponsored the bill to discuss the public-private partnership model. And really where we were at with it was, we have three concepts on I-70. The first one is really to do the minimum that we have to do that meets the test of what the Federal Highway Administration is allowing us to do, and that is we have to rebuild the corridor. So really all of the pavement and bridges that you see out there today would all be rebuilt pretty much in their existing condition. And then we would add another lane, really pave the median, the grass area out there that you see today that's in the middle of the roadway that separates the two roadways. We would pave that and put a concrete barrier down the middle of it. Most of the interchanges would be rebuilt. Some of them would not, because they've been worked on since then. And that's a $2 billion option. The problem with that one is it causes a lot of challenges for construction. You pretty much have to work right in the middle of where traffic's going to be, and so there would be a lot of diversion of traffic. The middle option, which is about a $3 billion option, that one allows us to buy some more right-of-way and property that allows us to expand the width of the corridor and build the 6-lane corridor in segments. And you still end up with the same amount of lanes, but you have a wider corridor, and it helps you manage traffic a little better. The option that really was most popular is the $4 billion option, as I talked about earlier, and that's the dedicated truck lanes, where it would be 8 lanes. You would have 2 lanes on each side dedicated for truck traffic, and then 2 lanes on each side dedicated for more passenger vehicles and pickup trucks and lighter truck vehicles. And that's the concept that really has met with a lot of favor, but it's a $4 billion project, very expensive, and it hasn't been done anywhere in the United States. We have all the environmental clearances with the Federal Highway Administration to do that, and we would love to pursue it.
If the bill is not approved, what happens?
Well, we believe the bill is not going to be approved. We're pretty confident that that's not going to happen. But the benefit of it is it actually helped accelerate the conversation about the problem that we have in Missouri that's not unique to Missouri, but it's happening everywhere in the country, and that is we have a funding problem for transportation. There's really a funding problem for infrastructure all over, but unique to Missouri is we have a challenge with funding for transportation. If tolling is not going to be the answer for I-70, then what are we going to do on funding for transportation on a statewide basis? Because as big as I-70 is, it's still just one project. You know, it's a big project, but it's just one project, and there's lots of needs all over the state of Missouri.
Yes, there are. And another important issue that MoDOT is facing that we can talk about are the improvements to the Whitten Expressway here in Jefferson City, and that's downtown. And can you explain to us what this project entails?
Well, the main project that's going on along the corridor, there's a lot of needs on, and the Rex-Whitten Expressway is a microcosm of challenges we have all over the state. And that is that we have congestion problems, especially in the morning and afternoon during the commutes when people come into the Capitol here.
Right.
And that is, it's difficult to get in and out. Whenever you have an incident, somebody has a traffic accident, some problem, somebody breaks down, it backs up traffic for miles and miles and miles.
Yes.
And so we have to come up with a solution that's going to alleviate that congestion so we can actually work on the roadway. And so we are doing the planning work to come up with the concept of how we're going to fix it. And that's in the process right now. The problem is we don't have the money to redo all of the corridor. We do have some funds for some spot projects, and I have to commend the community here in Jefferson City and Cole County to come together with us to come up with the funding to rebuild the interchange at Lafayette Street to help with the expansion at the prison and in that area.
And why is now the time to be talking about this project? What has brought this up now?
Well, I think again, it's the issue of what are the highest needs, and we have a very good relationship with our planning partners in the area here in Catso. We have a great area of our planning partners in our MPO areas, in Jefferson City in particular, and that's working on what are the transportation challenges that we have that are coming up in the area. There's things that we've been working on, for example, the 179 interchange at the new hospital out there, and it's the partnership that we develop. The teams have worked together, both MoDOT and the planning partners have worked on, okay, what are the next things that we need to be working on? And something that's always been on the table is how we're going to deal with the congestion on the Rex-Whitten Expressway. What
about the cost for this project?
I don't think we have a true estimate on it yet because we haven't gotten all the details on all of what the engineering would be necessary to do there yet.
And what about, there will be some impact on some of the historic buildings in Jefferson City. Can you tell us about that?
Well, there will be, and again, the Lafayette Interchange has already had an impact on a piece of property that was actually a historic church that we have worked with the community on to pay for relocation. And it's interesting that church was actually relocated from a previous MoDOT project on the Rex-Whitten Expressway also many years ago. And so here they are being impacted again, and so they're going to have to be relocated, and we've been working with them on that.
Okay. Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining us, educating us on the Missouri Department of Transportation. And for up-to-date news with MoDOT, you can visit their website, and that is, can you tell us what that is?
www.modot.org.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Join us again for another edition of Capital City Matters. Bye.